Whiplash is probably one of the most iconic films ever made. Not only was this a brilliant case study for every up-and-coming filmmaker and how you can take really little resources and make a super intense movie out of that. It was also a huge success, jump-starting Damien Chazelle's career. And most importantly, this is a movie that has a lot to say about the nature of ambition, success, and artistry with a message most movies wouldn't dare to say. Ambition without God's purpose for you will ultimately make you destroy yourself. After 10 years past the release of the film, I'm afraid that there are a lot of people who love this movie for the wrong reasons. A lot of people take this story about a young and promising drummer at the music conservatory that gets his dreams of greatness mentored by an abusive instructor as kind of a motivational story about following your dreams and not letting anything stop you from reaching your goals. People love stories about tortured geniuses. We just see that in the amount of movies, stories, biopics about really talented people that get successful and somehow end up with really tragic lives that are out there. People love these kinds of movies, but I've seen online that a lot of people have an issue with Whiplash's ending, and they find that some people find it confusing, some find it even sadistic. If you haven't seen this film, spoiler alert right here. At the end of the movie, the protagonist gets exactly what he wanted. The ending scene is directed like this triumphant ending, but what really happens is that the protagonist finally and completely kind of sells his soul in a way. This is actually some of the most brilliant and creative cinematic subversions that I have seen, and one of the big reasons why I think this is a brilliant film is that ending. The plot of every single film ever made is kind of centered around the protagonist's wants and needs. So the protagonist starts out wanting something that isn't good for him. During the film, he learns a couple of lessons that ultimately teach him to get his desires and his goals aligned with the things he truly needs that he gets in the end. If you ever wondered why every film kind of has this spiritual level to it and why you can give almost any high quality, well-made and well-told film a Christian interpretation, is because the struggle between our desires and our needs is so central to the Christian message. All right, we have a fallen nature as humans, and that's why we desire things that ultimately aren't good for us. And the Bible's purpose is to kind of get our goals aligned with the things we need and that are ultimately really good for us. But the reality is most people don't align their goals with their needs, but with their desires. And the film shows how that leads to a very tragic outcome. And the message of that movie is a message most people don't want to hear. The protagonist of Whiplash is someone who is obsessed with his success as a musician. His reasons to make music are kind of grounded in a love for music, but ultimately serve no other purpose than self-fulfillment. And we see that reflected in the antagonist of the film, who also has a certain love for music, but his methods in kind of pushing his students through abusive methods, through violence and profanity in order to get to strengthen their craft. All of that is basically just to please himself and not others, and not the audience through the craft and artistry of others. The reason why stories about obsession are mostly about artists and creatives is that creative work is so easy to distance as a service, as an act of service. Because so much of art and entertainment industry and the whole world around it is corrupted by a false idol worship. Why are most MeToo stories, or kind of the horrific things we've been hearing from the Diddy parties, why is all of that coming out of Hollywood and kind of the creative industry? It's because the creative and arts and entertainment industry is one of the only places where people are voluntarily willing to put themselves through abuse in order to get somewhere. In many cases, it's voluntarily selling yourself to an abusive slave master. And I know that sounds kind of extreme, but just think about it. Why would somebody voluntarily put himself through the abuse the protagonist of Whiplash goes through? The film makes a strong case that the reason for that is that the protagonist worships himself, or rather an imaginary famous, successful musician version of himself. He's willing to put himself under actual physical pain and psychological terror because he's chasing to fulfill a thirst that is impossible to satisfy. This is where the teacher kind of comes in place, and the protagonist puts all of his ambition and self-worth into the teacher's judgment, and that way the teacher is able to like ask anything from the student, and the student will oblige. It's just a brilliant story for me as a Christian, that if you don't believe in the one true God, you will make something else your God. Even if you watching this aren't a creative or an entrepreneur and you can really relate to that specific story, you do have a certain story you believe in and values you live under that kind of determine your sense of security, guidance, and actual self-worth. But the problem is nothing that isn't the one and true God can fulfill your need for self-gratification in the right kinds of ways, because that's why other religions, other things we can worship, like our careers, money, self-fulfillment, freedom, sexual liberation, all of these political things, they don't work for an extended period of time. Like God is the only thing that can give us the right kind of guidance and satisfy our need for self-worth. In Whiplash's case, it's the creative career as an example of something that is worshipped by the protagonist. The ending of the movie reflects the destinies so many of us can expect for themselves, that you may actually get the thing you desire, but you won't learn your lesson. So that's how success and money and all of these great things can make certain people feel more empty because they have like given everything for that. And when it comes, what is left if there is no purpose behind all of that? I mean, you actually can become successful, but what if you're not able to enjoy that success? The creative act and like creativity music in Whiplash is totally subtracted from any sense of joy or service. Each time we see like the protagonist, it's shot in a really intense and dark and oppressive way. Like the rehearsal room has no color in that, and the final performance also never shows the audience and barely even the other musicians in the orchestra. And creativity is total self-fulfillment in this movie, and the way it's expressed visually there is so creative. It even goes to the extreme of like making the final performance all about the drums. I mean, just imagine sitting in that audience. It will be more weird than like an impressive visit and an impressive concert, right? The filmmakers at one point, even in the end, cut out the music and it's like silent and you just witness all of the pain that is happening right in front of your eyes. At other points, there are like the differences in music quality in some of the scenes is so subtle, like you as not a music expert don't notice it at all, and not even the other characters at certain point notice the differences in tempo and so on that the teacher is kind of trying to get out of the protagonist. And in the final moments of the film, all that is left is like kind of a technically brilliant performance that is empty of any meaning and creativity. And it's all just there for the oppressor and the oppressed, not any kind of audience. And the most tragic aspect of this whole movie and story for me is that there's one point shortly before kind of the final climax of the film where the protagonist actually got out of the rat race, and it looks like she let go of the idol she held on to, but we find out that he actually never changed his heart. And I just love how this film shows that, because this is so real to me. Like that's the exact reason so much of the self-help content online doesn't like create a lasting impact. Jesus changed the behavior and lives of 12 disciples, but he only changed the hearts of 11 of them, because one of them betrayed him. Like Judas, he lived with Jesus and he did everything in the right way for months, but in his heart, he never changed. That's how he was able to betray Jesus. And it's just the same thing the protagonist is going through. That's how in the end he reaches his goal, but loses his personal battle. I remember first watching this film at 14 years old. I was a bit too young for this film, I think. Opening night at a film festival, and I didn't pick up on the tragic meaning of Whiplash. I thought the ending was super impressive for the right reasons, but the way I saw it was wrong. I thought it was like super motivational. That's what I see reflected when I look into the comment sections under scenes on YouTube from the movie. Like people think this movie ended on a motivational tone because the protagonist's desires are fulfilled. And on the other hand, end of the spectrum of the audience reactions you can witness to this movie, there are also Christian audiences who think this movie is sadistic. Yes, there are all kinds of extreme profanities in the film, and I do think that they serve a purpose in putting us through the emotional pain and stress the protagonist is feeling. And aside from that, the movie is overall really brutal and painful as a viewing experience, but it is truthful. And for me, it is an important warning sign to us not to make our careers or success subjects of worship and false idols. Success at all costs will make you lose everything. And what if you get success but aren't able to enjoy it? Idolatry is just, it robs you of your ability to function properly as a human being. And as a human being you were created to be. That's why we are supposed to put our worship and our idolatry into the one place, the source of where that desire came from, the one true and living God, the creator of the universe. Whiplash isn't a Christian or faith-based film in any way. Still, it's a film that is aligned with reality and it speaks truth, and that's what makes this into a timeless, relevant masterpiece and a movie that makes us reflect in all the right and fruitful ways. All right, guys, this is it for my review of probably one of my favorite movies of all time. What do you think about Whiplash and its message? I thank you so much for your time and attention watching my review right here. I wish you all a blessed day and hope to have you back in my next video.